of embarrassing, but for the record, if anybody would let Coach Riley know that I still have 4 years of eligibility, that would be great. I would appreciate that. So anyway, as he said in the bio, I've been in the district attorney's office for 20 years, which, when it comes to talking about the subject of medical marijuana, a lot of people say, well, obviously he's got the prosecutor's bias against marijuana. And I would say that it's true. In the 20 years that I was in the DA's office, I worked with a lot of dysfunctional families that I attributed it to marijuana use or other drugs, that marijuana was kind of the gateway that led to those other drugs. I dealt with a lot of neglected children that I can say it was attributable to marijuana abuse. But by the same token, I also was on the criminal defense side of the equation for 20 years also. And in doing that, I also saw a lot of overzealous prosecution of cases and involving marijuana and some of the disasters that caused. But also, between all of that, through my whole career, I have spent about 40 years as the civil advisor for corporations, businesses, government entities, the city of Miami, the Ottawa County, and we've dealt with the employee-employer issues that involve marijuana. And so when I was appointed to serve on this committee, I was a little surprised because I was at least of the House Democratic Caucus. I don't know if I was the only member that was opposed to State Question 788, but I certainly was the most vocal opponent to State Question 788. And I was opposed to it not because I'm opposed to the concept of medical marijuana. Every time we had the opportunity to vote on an issue in the legislature, I voted for the medical marijuana use. But I was opposed to 788 because I thought it was such a poorly written piece of legislation. And now that I'm serving on I call it the Joint Committee. It is members that are made up of the House and the Senate. There's Democrats and Republicans on it, and they roughly correlate to the numbers that we have in those bodies. So serving on that, I've had plenty of opportunities to look at the various issues, and even though when I would say things about, this is a problem with 788 before the election, the marijuana advocacy groups would say, oh, that's a bunch of bull, there's nothing wrong with that. Well, now that it's passed, they're coming in and saying, yeah, that really is a big problem and we need to work on it. And so, just to give you a brief example, Question 788 was 5 pages long, I believe, and this is what the medical marijuana advocacy groups have been proposing to try to fix some of the problems of 788 since it's passed. And some of it's pretty good stuff, and I think that there's a lot to be said for their efforts in trying to fix these problems. But there's still a whole lot of questions out there that at this point I don't know that there are answers to, and there won't be answers until the legislature actually takes some affirmative action and deals with some legislation to fix some of these problems. Just to give you the This is the most recent release from the Oklahoma Medical Marijuana Authority, which was on October 21st. As of that date, so that's 4 days, what day is today?
26th.
5 days ago. So 5 days ago, at that point in Oklahoma, we have issued 8,459 patient medical marijuana cards, 65 caregiver cards, 608 dispensary cards, 956 grower licenses, and 253 processor licenses. Now I want to put some of that in perspective for you. When we have 956 grower licenses that have been issued so far in Oklahoma. When we were at 600 grower licenses, and let me tell you, we have all kinds of information being thrown at us on this committee, and I haven't had the time to verify, to make sure that all of this information is correct, but I don't have any reason to believe that anybody's lying to us about this information. So I'm giving you these figures because they've been given to me, but I can't absolutely 100% tell you it's correct, but I think it is. When we were at 600 grower licenses, and it was something like 614, the information that we were given was that was more grower licenses than had been issued in the states of Oregon, Washington, and Arizona put together. And in each of those states, there are limits on how much you can grow with a grower's license. In Oklahoma, there is no limit on how much you can grow with a grower's license. And so the net result of this is what we're hearing, what I'm hearing, is that the medical marijuana industry and the recreational marijuana industry across the country, in those states where recreational is legal, they are petrified with what we're doing here in Oklahoma, because we theoretically could be growing so much marijuana that we're going to destroy the industry. And right now in Oklahoma, there's no limits on what you can do. Now, I understand with 956 grower licenses, that doesn't mean there are going to be 956 people or businesses that are actually going to grow marijuana. Again, this is all stories that have been relayed to me, but I've been told that there are folks that are buying these licenses as an investment. And the investment pays off this way. At some point in time, the state of Oklahoma is going to have to come in and put limits on the amount of marijuana that's grown in this state. If we don't, we are going to destroy the industry across the nation. But the reason why you would buy a grow license right now is because then, when the state puts those limits on the grow license that were not in place when you bought the license, you have a lawsuit against the state of Oklahoma for a governmental taking. And the state will have to pay you. And so that, to me, that is the absolutely most important reason why we need to go back as the legislature and fix these problems. And the sooner we fix them, the better off we are. The longer we wait to fix the problems, the bigger problems we're going to have, and the more expensive it's going to be to try to fix it. So we have huge problems. Marijuana is currently being sold legally in Oklahoma. The first sale was about 3 weeks ago. The problem for the consumers are that in Oklahoma right now, there are no quality control that are in place. If you go buy some marijuana in Oklahoma, you don't know what you're getting. A grower could spray their crop with all kinds of pesticides and insecticides and herbicides. Well, you wouldn't use herbicides, but fungicides and all of this, harvest it the next day and sell it. And so you simply have no idea of what it is that you're buying as a consumer. It is truly a buyer beware situation right now. So, one of the issues that we've been spending a great deal of time on with the bicameral medical marijuana legislative working group is trying to come up with some rules and regulations that the health department can put in place to protect the consumers for what they're getting. Put some testing in place so that when a consumer buys the product, they know that they're not buying something that's contaminated with heavy metals or with all kinds of other poisons. And then also, we've been working on labeling because in the marijuana industry, and I still don't know a whole lot about it, and I can't remember the names of the different strains of marijuana. There's a lot of colors in there. It's like, blue buffalo is one kind of, and I'm making that up, by the way. But it's one kind of strain, and it has these medicinal effects. Or you could have the gray ghost, and it has these effects over here. And they're kind of accepted throughout the country. But in Oklahoma, because there are no labeling standards, again, you have no idea what you're buying. If you've been a user of medical marijuana in Colorado, for instance, and Blue Buffalo is the stuff that you need to address your problems, you come into Oklahoma and buy some Blue Buffalo, you have no idea what you're getting because there is no labeling requirements. So these are issues that we've been addressing. As of 2 weeks ago, we finally passed a recommendation. After 13 weeks of working on this, we passed a recommendation asking the state health department to implement all of these things as rules for purposes of testing the quality of the marijuana, what its medical qualities are, whether it's pure, uncontaminated, on and on. So, as of yet, the health department has not done that, but I trust at some point in time they will. And the sooner they do that, the better, because as I said, marijuana is already being sold in Oklahoma. The other problem is it requires a lot of testing to get all of this done. And right now in Oklahoma, there is not the testing capability available right now for the quantities of marijuana that we're going to be dealing with. It will happen, I'm firmly convinced of that, but we're told that to set up a lab to do the kind of testing that this all would require will take 6 to 8 months, maybe longer. So once these rules are in place, we still have 6 to 8 months. The buyer beware. You don't know what you're buying when you're buying marijuana in Oklahoma. So those are the kinds of problems we have. I know municipalities throughout the state, I keep reading about them in the paper. They're jumping in there and passing all kinds of ordinances to restrict dispensaries and grow operations and on like that. And as the city attorney for the city of Miami, I'm saying, guys, don't do anything. We are in the process of amending our criminal statute for the criminal possession of marijuana, because that's clearly changed since 788 has passed. So we're trying to bring that into conformity with what 788 calls for. But other than that, my advice to the city of Miami has been, don't do anything until we know what the legislature's gonna do. Those cities that have already jumped in, they're already being sued. For the most part, they're losing. And that's the reason why I'm saying, let's figure out what the legislature's gonna do first, and then we can figure out what you want to do. But it's just premature to jump in to do anything else at this point. So those give you some of the ideas of the issues that we have. We already have an employee of the city of Miami that has a medical marijuana card. And the issue there is it safe for him to do his job? Is it safe for his coworkers for him to do his job if he is under the influence of marijuana? And I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to the question, what can the city do to protect the coworkers? What can the city do to keep him from hurting himself and then filing a workers' comp claim? I don't know. I mean, that's the only responsible answer that any attorney can give to their client with those types of questions right now is, I don't know. And that's certainly not the answer that any responsible employer wants to hear. But the reality is, all of these issues are unaddressed by 788, but 788 is the law in the state of Oklahoma. And so how we are going to work this out so that we implement the intent of what the voters voted in, and yet still make it where it's safe and practical and workable for the employers and for banks. Banks are a whole nother issue. Of course, that's primarily a federal issue, but the whole money system relating to marijuana is a big unknown. There are groups that are wanting to create a state bank out of the control of the FDIC, which is how the federal government prohibits the use of marijuana money, how they control that from entering into the banking system. Well, we don't have any law in Oklahoma on how to deal with a state bank that is operating on behalf of a medical marijuana business. So, lots of unknowns. And having said that, I'd be glad to try to answer questions that you all have. I mean, I could ramble on for a couple of hours if you wanted me to, but I don't think you do. And I'd rather be talking about the things that are of interest and concern to you than just sitting here rambling. So, yes?
Ben, you had talked about the health department coming in and establishing a testing or a way to monitor the quality control. Are they planning on having that just at one location, or have you talked about having different locations throughout the state to where if somebody in Ottawa County has a dispensary or a growing license that has to be make sure that it's quality controlled, do they have to ship their product all the way to Oklahoma City to have tested? Or is there going to be multiple testing facilities under the health department throughout the state?
Okay. So first of all, I don't think the intent is for the health department to actually do the testing. I think it will be for them to license businesses that do this testing. Okay? We've talked with the Department of Agriculture, and they do some of the testing that would be required here, but they say we do not have in any way, shape, or form the ability to deal with the quantity that you're wanting, and we can't do all of the tests that you would want to have done. And so the health department has none of that. So the idea is that private businesses will open up, do the testing, but be licensed by the health department to make sure that they're doing the quality of work that needs to be done. Now, the second thing, to get directly to your answer, all of the equipment, the machinery that is required to do that testing is extremely expensive. And so, what I envision is that there will be, 1, 2, 3, 4, however many different labs that want to set up throughout the state, and you would have to bring the marijuana to them for the testing to be done. It's just too expensive to have one in every county, for instance. So, and that raises another question that I did want to comment on. I told you that there were 956 grow licenses that have already been issued. There are 253 processor licenses that have already been issued. As the city attorney for the city of Miami, I have gotten calls from 5 different businesses that are all saying they're wanting to come and establish grow operations in Miami. And then there's a 6th one that is wanting to do a grow operation in Quapaw that I'm aware of, because the city attorney for Quapaw called me saying, what do we do with all of this stuff? And so my point is that if we have 6, and so in Ottawa County, I'm aware of 6 different businesses that are planning on coming in here and growing marijuana. So I've asked some of the people that are in the business, and several of them I've had a lot of conversations with. There's 2 in particular that are presently operating grow businesses in California, both of them are originally from Miami, and so they are 2 of the 5 that are wanting to come back to Miami. And so I said, well, how much marijuana do you grow in one of these? How much marijuana does one of these operations grow in order to take care of the medical marijuana needs of the people of Ottawa County? And both of them said, well, an average grow operation in California. And understand, in California, there are limits on how much you can grow. There are no limits on how much you can grow in Oklahoma. But both of them had put it in context that I can understand. An average grow operation, one average grow operation in California would produce enough medical marijuana to take care of the needs of all of Ottawa County, Delaware County, and Craig County, and possibly Mays County. But we're going to have 5 of them in Miami and 1 in Quapaw. So that's what I'm really trying to emphasize to you. We're going to be growing so much marijuana, it's going to go somewhere. It's far more. It's thousands times more than what the citizens of Oklahoma that would be entitled under 788 to get a medical marijuana card are ever going to use. And so the rest of that marijuana, they aren't going to just get rid of it somehow, miraculously. It's going to be used one way or another. And most of that is, I'm afraid, is going to go into the black market. And that's why the rest of the states are petrified with what we have done so far in Oklahoma. So, but thanks for that question. Any?
If
Yes.
you don't have any precedents or any way to control it, how can you enforce it? I mean, you're sitting here and saying you don't have a basis for what it will do. So if something goes wrong, and it will, then what are you going to do under prosecution?
Well, as an old prosecutor, every time I look at a piece of legislation, I look at exactly that question. How does this affect the prosecutor that's trying to protect his citizens? And in this case, there are just no answers to a lot of these questions. How are we gonna deal with all the excess marijuana that's gonna be grown in Oklahoma? Keep it out of the black market? You know, the problem is, most of the states that have medical marijuana or even recreational marijuana, they require monitoring from seed to shelf. So what that means is when they put a seed into the growing mixture, they put a UPC code on it. And that UPC code follows it from it being the seed until it ends up being on the shelf. And that's how you can track that plant. Whether Oklahoma does that or not, I don't know. I certainly think we should, because without being able to identify from seed to shelf, you know, you have a grow operation that has 10,000 plants and they end up only legally processing 50 pounds of it. Well, where'd the rest go? Well, I know where it's going, but how do you prove it? And that's the problem. So the legislature that's one of the things that the legislature needs to do. Understand that the health department can address some of the issues by rules, but a whole lot of the issues are going to have to be addressed by the legislature itself. This is why at the end of the session this past spring, you know, we quit 3 weeks earlier than what the law required us to quit. And there were several of us that say, you know, we still have budget issues that we need to deal with, but if we're not going to deal with those, let's at least talk about what happens if 788 passes. But that didn't happen. They would rather that we adjourn and not address these issues until after the fact, so that's what we did.
Kick the can down the road.
Kick the can down the road. So now, like I said earlier, I mean, we're going to have lawsuits against us when we do put restrictions on these 956 licenses that have been issued. And by the way, at this point, there have been 1,043 grow licenses that have been applied for. So there's still, 50 or 60 that are in the process of being approved.
How many Russians took to vote this bill in?
I'm sorry?
How many Russians did take to vote this in? I can't believe it passed in Oklahoma.
Well, I mean, they put the name medical marijuana on it, and everybody bought that. It's not a medical marijuana bill as it is written, in my opinion. Now, let me add this. In my opinion, this is the worst law in the nation. We do have the chance of making it the best law in the nation, but it's going to require the legislature to go in and really work hard to fix a lot of these problems that are not addressed. Yes?
You know, you were talking about quality control and labelings and other things earlier on. Why aren't we using Title 535, which controls our pharmacy force and the productions and dispensing of medication to address those issues?
Well, that's an interesting question.
If we're really dealing with medical substance, something that's going to be used in a medical setting for a medical reason, shouldn't it fall under those laws and regulations that are already in effect?
Good question. So, you know, and understand, I mean, while I may sound very critical in some of the things that I'm saying about the marijuana advocacy groups, actually they've been the best source of information for me on trying to figure these things out and address these issues. But I will say, the advocacy groups, and it's interesting because there's 6 different people that all claim to have been the writer of 788, the exclusive writer. So I don't know who really wrote it, but anyway, there's a bunch of them that claim it since it passed. Now, if it had failed, probably no